one point that led us to work with those two countries in the comparison is not only their similarities in length and population, but also their differences in framing their own partition of authorities in their own federative model. So Brazil, as Ilaria has already mentioned, is a three-layer federation, and one historic explanation to that unusual model relies in the deep asymmetries one can find between some states and some municipalities in the Brazilian territory, especially when it comes to their role in driving the economic development and therefore the consequences in the public revenue. So it's been a long intent of the capitals, the major cities, to have more autonomy, and this was reached in the 1988 Constitution. So in the Brazilian Constitution, municipalities are provided of autonomy. They are provided of self-organizing, self-governing, and self-administration powers. And the municipal authority, its legitimacy, powers, and limits derive directly from the Constitution. Regarding authority allocation, the Brazilian Constitution deals with many criteria, but it uses mainly the explicit description of private competencies, private authority, and some sort of common competencies as a response to a predictable possibility that some administrative functions might require concurring efforts. So this is in a draft, in a very quick draft, how the Brazilian Constitution deals with this three-layered federation model. The Federal Supreme Court, whenever an intra-governmental conflict presents itself, applied a criteria that the court names as the predominant interest criteria. So whenever there's a dispute about who is the federation level, who is supposed to deal with the situation, the court will try to find who has the predominant interest and grant for this federation level the competency to decide. So intra-governmental allocation of responsibilities in Brazil was always a potential conflict, but it was usually solved through political agreement, rather than the strict application of constitutional clauses in the matter, especially because in our system, the revenue is very concentrated in the federal level. Therefore, there will always be the main argument to agree with central government orientations in order to receive a little bit more, a bigger share in the public budget. So, pandemic and the controversy on federal, state, and local governments' responsibility. How does that problem pose itself in Brazil? Pandemic in Brazil set a very deep disagreement between our, let me try to find a political correct expression, our COVID impact-denying president, which believed in herd immunity and other fables. And on the opposite side, very concerned governors and mayors, which according to the Brazilian Constitution are the direct responsible to provide assistance in the health realm. So there was a polarization, central government in one position and states and municipalities in the other one. At this point, and this is interesting and explains a lot, states and municipalities were in fact aligned in their own position. So you will not find in Brazil situations just like this one that Ilaria described, in which a state will have a different understanding than municipalities that are in their own territory. The polarization was with the central government mainly. So the political conflict led to judicialization on the authority allocation, because considering the fact that the Constitution has explicit clauses, has some sort of framework in that matter, it opens space to judicialization. And it happened very quickly. In April, you have the first decisions, the first rulings of the Federal Supreme Court in the matter, in 3 distinct lawsuits presented by political parties mainly. In these lawsuits, the problem was, again in a nutshell, the problem was we have a federal law which draw the main strategies to to fight the pandemic, and the central government was trying to retain all the deliberation related to restriction measures, just like mandatory use of masks, schedule limitations to commercial activities, or even access to leisure public spaces like beaches and squares. So you have these 3 main lawsuits at the 6341, 6343, and ADPF 672. And the court at this moment granted authority to states and municipalities to decide in the matter. And just for you to have a sample of the court's impression in the matter, in the ruling there's a little segment which says the following, and I'm quoting: "The federal executive power exercised the role of a central entity in planning and coordinating governmental action related to public health, but not even can put away unilaterally the decisions of the states and municipal governments, which exercising their own constitutional competencies, adopting their own territories, sanitary measures foreseen in federal law." So a provisional measure was granted in the 3 mentioned lawsuits, granting states and municipalities full authority to decide in their own geographic limits according to the traditional criteria of the predominant interests. So the court applied the traditional criteria. I have already mentioned that these 3 ones were filed in April, but from these 3 ones follows a lot of new lawsuits and new attempts to reframe that decision in the Supreme Court. And the last one was filed yesterday. There's a new lawsuit filed yesterday. It's today in the front page of the Federal Supreme Court site. It's the 6855, in which the central government asks for a preliminary injunction to suspend lockdown measures edited by 3 different states, Rio Grande do Norte, Pernambuco, and Paraná. And the reasoning for this is that, according to the central government, these restrictive measures are not sufficiently motivated, justified, grounded in objective, formal, and known data that allows that sort of restriction. So this is very new. We don't have any decision even in a preliminary proxy. So preliminary observations on our research as at the point that we are. Brazil tried to clarify authority partition between federal, states, and municipal entities in the Constitution, but there will always remain a shadowland, considering areas in which concurring efforts are definitely required. So a constitutional framework in the intersection of federal, state, and local governments' responsibilities to protect public health provides surely grounds for judicialization. Even though provisional measures can be granted, as in fact they have been granted, the very nature of the conflict is mainly political, and judicial orders will not have the power to overcome the dissension. So in the US model or in the Brazilian model, with or without a more robust legal framework in the matter, it all goes in the end to political agreement, and the possibility to use the judiciary is only another tool to overcome the political conflict. That's it. Thank you very much.